very soon is we will get, oh look, more people arriving. That's fantastic. Welcome all, welcome all. I'm going to do a very quick one of these tricks, see if this works. Still done this in a while. Okay. Now, okay, so what's going to happen is we're going to do our distance learning lesson. There are going to be times in it that I'm going to get you to do things, and there is also going to be some work that's going to magically appear in the classroom for you to do, and that's really cool. We are going to be using Nearpod again, or attempting to, because that's kind of the design of it. Now, I haven't done it distance-wise like this before, so I'm hoping that the technology will still work. All right, but please bear in mind if there are technical issues, it's okay, we can sort it out, don't panic, but it should all work. And I've also in Classroom posted what it is that we're going to be doing. So that's the plan. Now, assuming that we're back next week, then we'll be back to regularly scheduled programming in the class, and we'll be able to do a bit more full explanation of some content, etc. However, if we're not, if we're still doing distance learning next week, I'm going to rely on you quite a bit to make sure that you're asking questions when you're not sure and keeping up with the work and all of those sorts of things. Because, you know, the work will start to get quite complicated quite quickly. And if we're not keeping up, then, you know, we'll need to make sure that we get the material to you as we can. All right. So what I'm going to do is I will be jumping into Nearpod, hopefully. Yeah, all right. Now, if I go back here, now if I present, all right, now, it should be presenting now. Good. All right, and then if I go to Nearpod, now that's your code, 74PUH. Apparently I can turn it into a Zoom meeting. That's pretty exciting. I haven't tried that trick. Might try that trick one day. But 74PUH in nearpod.com. And if you jump into there, that would be fantastic. See how we get on. I know it might be difficult with the technology and all of those other sorts of things. So we're going to do our best, okay? If you have any issues, please let me know. That's going to be one of the #1 things for all of your teachers, all of your classes. If there are any issues, any problems that you're encountering technology-wise or whatever, please do just let us know. All right? All right. So, therefore, this is who I should all see, and you should all be arriving, and I think you're all there. That's pretty cool. Is that you all in? 16. I've got 16 in. Should be a couple more coming in. Yeah. If I refresh that, maybe that will. I'll go back here. Okay. All right. Now, so therefore, as said before, the code should be up also in the classroom. I think I pushed it to the classroom, 74PUH. All right, so if you get lost at all, you should be able to join in there. I've got 16 registered so far. It may be that some are having a struggle with the registering, but we'll move on. 17 in. All right. Now, we've had a look at why countries trade with each other. We've had a look at mercantilism. That's not what we're going to be looking at today. One of the very first things that we're going to be looking at is this idea of globalization. All right, I don't know if you've heard of this idea of globalization before, but this is one of the key aspects of the theme of international trade, because with more trade, there is more globalization, and the more international trade there is, the more globalization that will occur. So things that we say that are quite good about globalization, these are the ones along here, and the things that we say are maybe not so good about globalization, they're kind of along here, and we're going to add a couple others perhaps as well. But the first thing I want to ask you is what globalization actually is. Okay, that's the very first thing that I want to ask. So what I'm going to do is I am going to stop sharing. And I'm going to turn off my mic very shortly. And what I want you all to do is to discuss what you think globalization is. Ready? And go. All right, so if I come back in, just wanting to ask you, what now do you think is meant by this idea of globalization? So what did you come up with? Here's where you answer. You can do via chat if you so wish. Going international is one suggestion. That's an idea. Any other thoughts? Globalization, what it might mean? Yeah, good work, Senna. Yeah, good thinking. Importing and exporting goods, that's a good idea. You know what I was going to do? I was going to do this as like an expert session. So I was going to actually get you all to discuss it and then just like randomly pick one of you to give an answer. But that's kind of mean, I guess, really. But kind of sounded fun at the time when I thought of this. And I was going to ask Zen because I thought, well, Zen's an expert. He knows these things. So it could be like a whole session, like, you know, just ask Zen. And that could be kind of cool. Do you have any thoughts, Zen? What do you think? Interesting. No? Okay. So, therefore, globalization as we see it in our Neopod, this one, what we're thinking about there, hold on, let me just make sure I'm doing this, presenting again. No. So if we go back to the Neopod, there he is. What we're thinking here is we're thinking about a process of integration, a process of becoming global, a process where all of our cultures, all of our understandings, they all kind of merge together. Everybody becomes, you know, what do we talk about? It's called global citizens, where we are all one instead of individual countries. You know, we kind of, all of our cultures all change. We kind of all become kind of McWestern, all right? Where we're all kind of doing, everybody's speaking English perhaps, everybody is going to international schools. Everybody is doing the international type thing. And a lot of that has to do with trade. We're buying the same goods and services. We are talking about the same things, we're watching the same movies, all of those sorts of ideas. That's a global approach to life. All right, so here what we've got here is it says that globalization actually leads to an increase in trade. You've got more choice because the world is becoming closer and closer together. So that sounds good. Then it says there's going to be greater competition, so therefore lower prices. Woo, that sounds great. There's going to be economies of scale, again, because we're able to use the networks, the supply chains. We're able to access the resources in different countries that we possibly couldn't before. We're able to do all of that and reduce our costs of production, increase our economies of scale. And this next one says increased capital and labor mobility. Now, this is going to be a bit tricky. Well, it's not a bit tricky. Labor mobility, we understand. People moving all around the world for jobs. Yeah, you know, good old Kiwi in Malaysia, yeah? Labor mobility as a result of trade and globalization. The other one says increased capital mobility. So it's capital mobility. And what we're talking about there isn't about necessarily the actual capital goods, so to speak, but more about finance, money that's able to flow around the world. Okay? Some of the bad sides, the disadvantages here, is that it might actually lead to more monopoly power, more monopoly control of industries or markets, through the idea of multinationals. Okay, so the Coca-Colas of the world absorbing other businesses, okay, and pushing out all the perhaps local contenders. You know? It might lead to structural unemployment, which we looked at when we looked at the unemployment topic, because of the idea that there are, you know, movements and changes within your economy. It might be that some people just get left behind. Their skills just aren't up to where we need them to be. It's globalization. And this next one is tax avoidance, making it easier. And you can't have a better case study of that than, say, the likes of Apple, who was able to put their base of operations in Ireland. And by doing that, they had a special tax agreement with Ireland, which meant that they paid very little tax in Ireland, which meant that they paid zero tax in America. And they were able to earn a whole lot of money from that particular tax agreement. They since got into trouble with that, by the way. The EU, because Ireland's part of the EU, said that they were breaking their EU rules with regards to taxes. And they took Apple to court with regards to it. This is a couple of years ago, not that long ago. And Apple ended up having to pay quite a bit of money to Ireland in order to cover the cost of that, you know, tax issue. So you don't need to worry too much about this. This is just what we are talking about. Okay, so other negative effects of globalization, all right, will be things like income inequality. It's going to be an issue that we're going to touch on again a little bit later in the course. Destroying local industries, businesses, greater dependencies for developing countries on the developed countries. Local negative effects like the prices. Maybe the prices are actually going to go up because they're now buying all the Apple products, for example. Yeah? Some critics advance stronger claims that there is a effect like on Indigenous people, all right, human rights abuses, okay, all of these sorts of unfair labor practices. These are all possible and quite scary issues with regards to globalization. So this would be a case where the examiner gives you an actual question about globalization and asks you to evaluate its effectiveness, asks you to evaluate whether it's good or not. And you can make the good points that we saw, these ones, and you can make the negative points. Now that gives you, just this one alone gives you 1, 2, 3, 4 good points and 3 negative points, and that's possibly enough if you're able to explain all of those. If you wanted more depth, you could go into some of these as well, and that would be a good thing that you could possibly look at. So here's what I want you to do. I would like you to explain one advantage of globalization and one disadvantage. Just one and one. Ready? Go. And I'm going to stop. Oh, there we go. Adding something in. There you go. We've got a couple of minutes to have a go at this. Go in. Keep going. Have a go. One advantage, one disadvantage. Good. Good. Doing well. Well done. Okay. Another little bit. Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. Well done. Some good answers there. Now, a little bit of a review. We've learned about this idea before, this idea of specialization. Okay. So when we discussed it before, we talked about it in regards to a business, all right, and what they might do to help improve their economies of scale, right, reducing their costs. But you can also think about it in the context of an actual country, a nation. And they might, in those cases, concentrate their productive efforts on producing a limited variety of goods. And it'll be those goods that they've got perhaps an advantage, a competitive advantage in producing. So there's an example there. There we go. The oil and gas in the Middle Eastern countries. So that would be a good example of a country specializing. You can probably think of other countries that might specialize as well. You could probably consider New Zealand, for example, which tends to specialize in the dairy industry, and you could argue tourism and the film industry, maybe hobbits. Okay, so there could be some specialization within each country. Malaysia, with regards to palm oil, you could make an argument about it concentrating its efforts on a limited variety of goods, like say palm oil. All right. Okay. Now, that then is the idea of a definition and an example. So there it is. And again, in your exam, you get asked what the definition is, and asked to give an example, then you're possibly looking at 2 to 3 marks with regards to that. Now, I'm going to, there's a complete the gaps exercise coming up. All right, and this one is about specialization. There you go. How are you getting on? It works, yeah. Okay, good. Well done, Amy. Okay, well, excellent. So what we were after there was that on there, the specialisation when an individual concentrates, a nation or individual concentrates its productive efforts on producing a limited variety of goods in which they are efficient at and productive at, and have an advantage over other countries in producing them. For example, due to the existence of vast oil and gas reserves, some Middle Eastern countries concentrate their production on petroleum, petrol, oil. All right, now if we move on. Now, okay, so a couple of things are going to be appearing in Classroom for you, just so that you're aware. One of which is a survey that's going to require your name, all right, so that I can double check the spreadsheet that I've got with regards to who is there and who isn't there, so I can put an accurate record into Engage. And also, it's going to ask you, what is it that you have learnt, okay? And what is it that you may need a bit more support with, okay? Just from the lesson today. Now, I've also just posted another learning activity, and this one is related to what we're doing, okay? But it's talking about this idea of protectionism that we introduced the other day. So if we move on, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. Okay. Now, going back, I haven't put that in there. That's a bit of a pain. Sorry, I'm jumping through your screens just a little bit. Okay. You remember we had a look at what free trade means and what protectionism means. All right. We talk about the idea of free trade, meaning that there is no government intervention in trade at all, none. All right. So no rules, no regulations, no tariffs, no anything. All right. And protectionism was where the government was interfering in trade. Right? So it was putting up rules and regulations about how to trade. It was putting up limits as to what you could trade. Okay, it was putting up tariffs or taxes on trade. It was putting up quotas potentially about the numbers that you could trade with. Okay, so we had a wee conversation about that the other day. Now, what I'm wanting you to do for this next little bit is twofold. The first thing I want you to do, right, is to be able to find real-life examples of protectionist policies. So that's going to require you to do a bit of a Google search. Okay, so you're going to go on and you're going to look for news articles about protectionist policies. So it's probably a good idea that you have a good understanding again about what protectionism is and some examples of the different policies. So tariffs, quotas, what's called administrative barriers, embargoes, what are those? Okay, and then go online, look for a news article, try and get one that you understand, that has a policy in place. So it might be a tariff, it might be a quota, something along those lines. And it's going to end up, if I jump to here, no, to here, no, it's not going to jump to either of those. All right, so in your classroom, it will be, wrong one. Right, updated. All right, it's going to look like this. Descriptions. All right, so it's going to appear like this. This is your doc that should appear now in your classroom. And relatively straightforward. You're going to put your name down here. Then in the middle bit, you're going to have an explanation of the trade policy you've discovered. So you go online, you look for it. And then this here is going to be the hyperlink to the news article that is the evidence for this policy. All right. Now, I don't want you to spend huge lengths of time doing that. You will notice I've told you how long I want you to do all of these sorts of things today. So if we scroll back to the beginning there, globalization, yeah. Advantages and disadvantages, yes. And then types of protectionism with real life examples. So that should take you, I didn't put the time on that, apologies. That should only take you about probably 15 minutes, I would think, if that. And that's what we're going to be working towards. Okay, so if I close this down, yes, and jump back to you, and stop sharing. All right, so the idea is that you're going to complete that Google Doc, okay? You'll fill it out, you'll put your name in it, you'll put what policy it is you have found, what does it mean? Well, it's a tax on steel, whatever, and then the evidence that you've got for that, so that you've got a real life example. Because in your paper, paper 2, you're going to have many case studies with regards to international trade. So it's very useful for you to find real life examples that you're going to be able to apply some of these concepts to. And because you're going to get them all together, you don't have to do all of the work. Everybody else is going to be putting in examples too. And so you'll have then a whole bunch of examples that you will have access to. All right, does that make sense? Is there any questions about that?
No questions.
That makes sense, okay. So if there are questions, you can always email me. The other one that's going to pop up, or has popped up very shortly, or has popped up, is about the survey. And that's just your name and what you learnt from the lesson. That's it. That's what that one is, all right? So for the next little bit, so we're going to sign off the meet, and you can do your work on the research with regards to protectionist policies. If you have any questions, send me an email. Otherwise, as we'd say in the land of my birth, have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.